All right, I'd like to welcome all of the attendees to our Learn to Hunt webinar. This is the topic tonight. We're going to talk about pheasant hunting 201 late season tactics. Again, thank you for joining us. My name is Bryan. I'm the statewide hunter outreach coordinator. I'd like to introduce our other panelists as well. So if they would unmute and open their videos and introduce themselves. Josh, would you start, please?
Name's Josh Melby. I'm the district wildlife manager out in Yuma County. So cover a lot of the pheasant hunting country in the northeastern part of the state.
Great. Larry, would you introduce yourself, please?
You bet. I'm Larry Conger, district wildlife manager in the Sterling district. I've got the southern half of Logan County, go out to the Haxton area from the Pruitt area.
Great. And Pepper.
Hi, I'm Pepper Canterbury. I am the Northeast Region Hunting and Angling Outreach Coordinator.
Great. Thank you all for joining us tonight. For the attendees, I've been fortunate to hunt with all of these individuals. They've all participated in some of our hunter outreach programs where we take men or hunters out, and they know a lot about pheasant hunting, a lot about hunting in general, and we're privileged to have them joining us tonight, sharing their experiences with them. Getting started, I'm going to share a short PowerPoint with everyone. All right. So what we're going to talk about tonight, basically three little things. What are the changes in pheasant habitat? What are the changes in bird behavior? And how to adjust your hunting tactics to try and get into pheasants. Now, this year is a really tough year for pheasant hunting. We've had some pretty extreme drought in eastern Colorado and across most of Colorado. That drought means that we have less available, tall quality cover. We've had some hailstorms that have come through in some pretty large swaths across the Eastern Plains, and that's interrupted some of the recruitment out there. So this year is not going to be your stellar pheasant hunting year, but pheasants will recover relatively quickly. So when we get some more moisture in future years, the habitat will respond, the birds will reproduce, and we'll get a lot more pheasants out there. Last few years, pheasant hunting has been pretty good throughout much of eastern and especially northeastern Colorado as well. So the first topic we're going to talk about is going to be the changes in habitat. And this is pretty simple. When we get the snows that come in, there's going to be a loss of the light cover due to the snow. So the snow comes in, it compacts that light cover. And even if the snow melts or blows away, sometimes that light grass cover is compressed and it's flat to the ground. It doesn't provide a whole lot of cover. So when we lose cover out in pheasant country, those birds tend to congregate a lot more. And when I say congregate, it's pretty routine to see flushes of 30 to 40 birds in the late seasons. So those birds are congregated together. One of the things that I do like about that late season pheasant hunting is if you get a fresh snow or you got a good snow across the landscape, you can see a lot of the turkey tracks. You can see where they're coming from, where they're going. And the picture on the right is some photos that I took when I was out pheasant hunting a year or two ago. The picture in the lower left corner, that's an area I just wanted to kind of share that you kind of see the little feather marks in the snow. That's where a bird flew away. It was actually hunkered under the snow, and in some of that tall cover of grass, when the snow comes, it forms a bit of a teepee shape, and it creates almost an airspace underneath the snow sometimes. And that's great thermal cover for these birds in some pretty rough winter weather out there. Cuts down on the wind chill out there, and the snow insulates it. So they actually reduce the energy they use just to survive through winter. So this is an area that we didn't even know the birds were there. We're talking for about 5 minutes, and all of a sudden, boom, a couple of birds erupted from the snow right there. So just to let you know that how birds take advantage of the habitat out there, and especially the changes out there. The next topic we're talking about is going to be the changes in bird behavior. And by bird behavior, we still have to remember that habitat is probably the most important thing you're looking for out there when you're pheasant hunting. Habitat is key, and it's key to so many of the game animals that we pursue as well. Because we have less habitat, like I said before, the bird populations, those pheasant populations generally are in higher numbers. So you may flush large flocks. you got to be kind of careful flushing those large flocks, and don't just flock shoot, because you may accidentally shoot a hen, which is illegal. We're only hunting the roosters. So these birds in the late season, they've been hunted by a lot of hunters already, and they tend to spook pretty easy. They're very wary. They know the patterns of most of the hunters out in the field. And we talk about most of the hunters out in the field. What they do is they show up to a field, maybe they park a little ways away, they come in, usually it's the same corner of a field or one of two corners. They hunt the edges of one field, maybe they follow the perimeter, and they come all the way back to the vehicle. Late season tactics, you probably need to hunt more of the interior portions of those properties. So the birds have been pushed from those edges, especially right alongside the edge of some good food cover nearby. They may be deeper into that cover or deeper into that field. So sometimes you got to change up your hunting tactics a little bit. In fact, there's sometimes I will just hunt the middle of the field. I won't even hunt any of the edges. And I have kicked some birds up hunting diagonally from corner to corner. And that I've kicked up a couple birds that way as well. When we talk about habitat as well, you need to be thinking about your tactics and how that relates to the habitat. So what I focus on when I'm hunting late season is I want to find the fields that have certain key characteristics of habitat. I would like some type of a food source, whether it's wheat stubble or cut corn nearby, or there may be some sorghum or millet fields, some type of a good food source that the birds can return to all through the winter. That's their source of energy that carries them through some of the hardest parts in their entire year. I also am looking for those tree and shrub rows in the area, and it may be a mile and a half away from the field that I get to hunt, but I still want to have that good cover there. Sometimes that cover is their survival cover during the worst winds and deepest colds that those birds experience. So if we want them to survive year round, odds are those birds are probably looking for cover nearby. A pheasant doesn't have to move more than a mile in its lifetime if it has all of its habitat needs. So when I'm looking for these habitat needs, I'm looking for those in a relatively small area, and whether it's a mile and a half, maybe 2 miles. I'm also looking for the tallest grass cover that I can find, especially the kind of those bunch grasses that when the snow comes, it creates kind of those kind of leaned over grasses with the space underneath. Birds will travel sometimes underneath that if the snow is not too deep as well. Wheat stubble nearby isn't a bad place to hunt as well. Sometimes they can go into that wheat stubble and they can feed. They can also use the tall wheat stubble as cover to loaf in during the day. That's what I look for when I go out there. So the way I change my tactics is I might go hunting on some of the worst weather days. Now, if it's blowing 70 degrees out there, I might stay home. I've actually gone out hunting in those conditions. I've come across a lot of birds, but unfortunately they closed the highway behind me and I was stuck out east until 10 p.m. that night. But 30, 40, maybe even 50 mile per hour winds, I might go out, especially the 30, 40 mile per hour winds out there. If you get some snow coming in as well, you can predict a little bit more where these birds are going to be. So when it's really windy, when it's really cold, I'm going to focus on those tree and shrub rows. I'm going to be looking for any place that's a low-lying area that just kind of takes that wind away, so the birds can hide in that low area and they don't have to experience a wind chill. I'm looking for those fields that have the nice tall grasses that have been bunched up, and I'm looking for all of that someplace near a food source that they can go to. As I mentioned before, I hunt deeper in the fields, and usually late season, I try to go in really, really quiet. I use hand signals. I call it a pheasant hunting ninja. So I like to go in really, really quiet when I go in as well. I bet you some of our presenters may have some other things that they will add in just a minute as well. So let's talk about some of the tips and tactics. I got just some little animations here to show you. This photo right here is a really neat late season photo. You got almost 40 pheasants that are flushing right from them, probably right alongside the road. They're in that shrub cover that's in there. If you experience this out in the field while you're hunting, I encourage you to be careful of your shot. Don't flock shoot. Your shotgun pattern expands, of course, and even though you may be aiming for a rooster, you may hit a hen accidentally. what I always tell hunters when they experience this is don't give up. In fact, this is probably the time where you need to hustle it up and get closer to where that flush was. Sometimes you get some birds that didn't get the memo from the rest of the group that says, hey, when this hunter comes at this point, we all flush. And so there may be a couple of single birds that are still left in that cover that if you can get in there, you may actually get a really good shot opportunity as well. So don't let down your guard whenever you see these big flushes. The other thing is watch where they go. In this flush, you can kind of see some of the low-lying area in the background. You see some heavy cover. These birds may be flying into that cover. They're probably not going to be sitting right where they go down, but they may be landing in that cover, and then they're probably running someplace to some other cover. But if that's a field that you can hunt, go after them. All right, this is a hunt that I did several years ago. This is a January hunt that I had some success with. This is a field out near Holyoke. It's actually in the public walk-in access program this year. It's in the year that I went out, there's a nice tall wheat stubble field. What I want you to be looking at before I start the animations is looking at the habitat. In the upper right corner, that year, it was a cut cornfield. I don't recall what that field is this year, but the corn provides food. The wheat stubble provides food. The wheat stubble can also provide loafing cover during the day. Kind of that lower edge of the property that is bordered in yellow is a tree row. That's going to be your deep winter survival cover. So the way I hunt this field, I don't actually hunt this entire field. I hunt a portion of it, and I change up my tactics. I went out all by myself this day. I parked my vehicle. Usually I would park it a little ways off the field, and I'd sneak into the field nice and quiet. I parked my vehicle on the road in this particular place on purpose as my own visual reference, but also as what might be a block for any pheasants that might be escaping in my final push through the field. So the path I would take is I would follow the edge of the field. I would hunt this relatively quickly. I might do some narrow zigzags, but my goal is not to necessarily do the wide zigzags and push birds. My goal is to hit the edges pretty tight and push any pheasants that are out there into the center of the field. Ultimately, that is my goal in this. I might flush a couple of pheasants here or there, but these pheasants tend to run when they see a hunter come or they hear a hunter come, and they're going to run someplace a ways away. So my thinking is I'm going to circle this field, and my final push, I'm going to come back, but not go all the way to the road. I'm going to turn and head south. That's when I start my wide zigzags, and I start to come through. And my goal is to try and hit any pheasants that are in that interior side of the field. And when I hunted this solo in January, I kicked out 3 roosters in this process. 3 roosters is your bag limit for the day. So in one field, I had an opportunity to harvest my bag limit. So just, again, this is something that I think you can do solo, or you can do in a small paired group if you want to get out there and do that. Here's another thing. I call it a drive-by. It's sort of using the pheasants' wariness against them. So I take my truck and I'll pull in on one side of a field, knowing that I have a county road on the far other side of the field that I can hunt. And I will make some noise. I'll open the door, I'll slam the door, I'll talk a little bit. What I want to do is I want the pheasants to hear me, think I'm a hunter, and they're going to run to the other side of the field. This field is 1 mile long. So I'll then jump into the vehicle, I'll drive to the other side of the field, and I won't park right by the field. I'll park off, I'll get out, I'll be super quiet, and I'll sneak into the field, and then I start hunting that field as quiet as I can. I'm trying to get into them. So sometimes you actually can push these birds. I've seen birds, about 5, 7, 8 minutes after I enter a field, I've seen them flush up to a half mile away. And I believe these were birds that were probably in the field, probably closer to where I started hunting. And they just ran across the field to the other side, and they flushed out the other side, knowing that that's how all the hunters ended up hunting it. Here's the same field, but we're using blockers. And when I say using blockers, this is not a tactic that I would recommend for brand new hunters. This is something for experienced hunters where everybody can be trusted to make good shots. Please wear orange hats, orange vests. You ought to be wearing them anyways out in the field. It's not a legal thing, but it is a safety issue out there. Make sure other hunters can see you and that you can see all the other hunters. Notice the wind is coming from west to east in this particular scenario. We place a couple of blockers. We drop them off nice and quiet on one side, on the west side, and they just kind of hang out there. The other blockers, they enter from the other side and they start pushing. They're probably zigzagging a bit through that field and they're pushing to the west side. The goal is that they will push some pheasants out as you kind of form a net, or you kind of come closer together. Be aware that there are some safe shot opportunities. There are some unsafe shot opportunities. The other thing you need to keep in mind too is that you can't shoot over a road. It is illegal to shoot over a road, and your shot could go 300 to 400 yards from the end of your gun. So be sure that as you are approaching that road, that your shots are not going to go over that road. Your shots are not going to hit any of your hunting buddies. So what might happen is the birds might squirt out the sides, or the birds might turn around and fly behind you, especially if you got a good wind. Sometimes you can predict where the birds are going to go. So you can safely pivot in place, make sure that there's no one behind you in the field before you mount, and you can still get a shot off oftentimes. So that's a couple of tactics. I got one more tactic I just want to show you some of these graphics on. This is going to be what we call a pivot corner, pivot irrigation circles. We have a lot of these properties in eastern Colorado. Many of them have been planted with some really good grasses that are good for brooding season. So hopefully we have some good populations that are out there. Some of these properties are going to have maybe cut corn in the middle. Maybe they have winter wheat. Maybe they have some type of a crop in the center of them. Oftentimes we as hunters get to hunt the corners. It's sort of a triangular shape. In this particular one, notice the red boundaries. Those are the county roads. And I place that those lines on there so that you know that you cannot shoot over those roads. This is one of the challenges of hunting corners, is the corners oftentimes are only 440 yards. That's about a quarter of a mile. So you get into this field, and if you shot straight across the field, across the county road, you might be illegally shooting across the road. So let's create a tactic where we can put ourselves into the best possible scenario where we're having a safe and legal shot opportunity. I got some X's that are out in that crop field. What I recommend, if you see birds that are flying out into that field, that's likely not a huntable part of your property. That is an area I pass up those shots, even if I got a bird that's still on my property, but it looks like if I shoot it, its trajectory might pass into that field. I'm going to pass up that shot instead of going in that field. So we get to hunt the properties that are labeled in your walk-in access, or if you have private property, ask the landowner if he's okay with you shooting birds off into that center of the field there. But anyways, we got 3 hunters. We've dropped them off on the 3 corners of this field. As we move these hunters, kind of notice they're kind of zigzagging, but they all come up kind of to that north side. They kind of form a net, and then they start to push south again. And the idea is that they're trying to push birds into an area, and then the 3 of them can kind of move, and then they get a legal shot south. It's not crossing the road, and they're not in an area where they're shooting at each other. So again, this is sometimes hard to do. You got to be able to talk with your hunting buddies when you attempt to do this so that they understand it. And sometimes the pheasants will flush out anyways. And so you may try it and they decide that they want to flush before you really get your party together. I'm going to stop sharing, and I would like to invite, let's see, Josh or Larry, would either of you like to share some of your, let's go with Josh. Josh, would you like to share any of your late season tactics when you've gone out after pheasants?
Yeah, I mean, you covered a lot of them, but one thing I always tell people is, don't overlook some of that non-traditional habitat. My district has a lot of sagebrush, pasture land, and yuccas that, when I tell people to go pheasant hunt it, they look at me like I'm crazy. And there's a lot of those places where when those birds get pressured, they'll move out into some of those pasture grounds, and it's not your traditional, chest high CRP grass, but you'd be surprised how many birds are in some of those pockets. So kind of looking for those out of the way areas, the stuff that 90% of the pheasant hunters drive by, and then really paying attention to the time of the day. Those pheasants are pretty habitual. They go out to feed in the morning. So that first, half an hour to hour, they're going to stay in that heavy roosting cover, but then they're headed to food. So you can pretty much guarantee, you know, all the birds in that quarter section of grass are going to be moving towards that food source. So, you know, as Bryan talked about, you know, pick that side of the field to go hunt. I've shot limits of birds before just sitting on the edge of a field because I know that they're going to the cornfield out of a big grass patch, and I'll just sit and wait, and they'll fly over me on their way out to feed or on their way back in from the feed. And just pass shooting them. So, you know, pay attention to those times when they're moving to the food. And then, you know, look for some of those natural food sources. You don't always have to have a cornfield. They'll eat a lot of sunflowers. If you can find grass patches or those weed patches with the head high sunflowers in them, those birds will use those prairie sunflower seeds. The seed heads on yucca pods. I've dressed a lot of pheasants that have crops full of yucca seeds. So look for some of those other food sources that they might be using. And then, you know, don't drive past the big patches. You know, some of your illustrations, you were talking about hunting as a single person. You know, everybody wants to go hunt the tree plot or the corners because they're easier to walk, easier to cover. And a lot of people will drive past those full sections of grass because, you know, they don't think they're going to be able to cover it. And you use some of those tactics Bryan discussed where you sneak around and you can have some pretty good success in those bigger fields. And one other thing is, you know, I've checked an older gentleman that he has an old battery powered radio when he's out hunting late season, and he'll get to one side of the field and he'll set his radio down and turn it on, and he'll drive around to the other side of the field and then walk it towards there and use his radio as a blocker. And he kills birds every year doing that. So, but.
Well, that's excellent advice. I was emailing another one of our potential panelists that wasn't able to join us tonight, but he's you know, he's probably out just about every weekend pheasant hunting. You guys have probably run into him out in the field a couple of times, but he had a lot of the same advice you had, Josh. Look at some of those fields that you might drive past. Maybe it's not that primo cover, just because they have been pushed there by other hunters and they haven't been pressured. Those are good fields. He also he suggested maybe vary your tactics up. So if you're not pushing birds out by walking slow and quiet through a field, he says, you know, kick it in gear and start walking through a field a little bit quicker. So great. Yeah. Thank you for sharing those. I like those. Larry, do you have any ideas and tactics you'd like to share with us?
Sure. I've got a few things. I do a lot of the same things that you and Josh have talked about. When I think about hunting late season, you know, there's two main things that I think about. One is late season with weather related, which a lot of times we'll get snow and bad weather, but a lot of times there's not. You know, right now it's really mild and we don't know. We could stay in this dry pattern that we're in right now. And, you know, we're going to get some cold nights and some cold mornings, and that'll bunch some birds. But first of all, I hunt where I know there's birds. So, you know, it's, if you have perfect habitat, but you haven't seen any birds there all season, you know, don't waste your time. I always tell everybody that I talk to about pheasant hunting is I don't leave birds to find birds. So if you've got an area where you know there's birds, where you're seeing sign, where you've seen birds even opening weekend, stick in those areas where you know that the birds are at, but change up how you hunt them. So there was a study done in the 90s on where birds are, late 90s, and they were radio collared birds, and 45% of our birds in the 90s were in CRP. And this is late season. 37% are in wheat stubble or your small grain stubble. 9% are in corn stubble, and then 9% are creek bottoms or old homesteads or windbreaks. So if you're not hunting the CRP grass, which we've lost a lot of, but there's still that good grass and corners out there. If you're not hunting the wheat stubble or those small good grain stubbles like Milo, or you're not hunting corn stubble, you're only hunting 9% of our birds, according to that study. So think about that. Yeah, there are weather events that'll drive them into those creek bottoms or those windbreaks. But if we don't have those events, you're not hunting a big segment of the population. So you want to start looking at those heavy grass corners or the wheat stubble where those birds are at. So What we want to do from there is, or what I do is I do the opposite of everybody else. Do the total opposite. If you're going to hunt that wheat stubble, go across the rows, go across the sprayer tracks and the combine tracks, because those birds will run up and down those like it's a freeway. So try to crisscross those. If you're in a cornfield, cross those rows. It's tough hunting, but you'll pin some down because they can't escape you straight ahead. So do that. Do the opposite of what is the easiest to do. Hunt the back of the field. We've talked about that a little bit. Bryan said that, instead of going in from the road, try to get to the back of that field. Do anything you can to do something different than what the norm is. You can pull up to one of your public access fields and you can tell where everybody parks and where everybody enters from, because it's all mashed down and it looks like a parking lot there. If there's no access to the back, I will enter the middle of the field, exactly like what Bryan showed in that clip that he showed, parking up in the middle of the field. And then from there, I'll do angles. I'll go out and I'll start doing circles up back and back on myself on my path. And I'll just start doing different things, trying to instigate a flush. I don't mind hitting the same area 2 or 3 times in a field where I know there's birds, because those birds are going to run until there's a point where they're confused at what you're doing. And that's basically what I try to do, is I try to confuse them. They're used to the pattern of going up the field one way, marching over 65, 70 yards, going down the field the other way. That's what they've seen. But if you go out and take off at an angle and then double back around and cross at an opposite angle, or do a circle around that same area, they'll be confused, and you'll get a flush that way. So instead of using static blockers, and again, this is all safety related, I use non-static blockers if I can, and I've got a group that I feel safe with. What I mean is, we might just circle the wagons around an entire quarter section and everybody just pinch into the middle, and everybody's moving. So when you do that, you have to trust that everybody's going to take safe shots, either outside of the circle or way above the circle, something that's going to fly up high above the heads of everybody else. So the other thing is, and we've talked about it, is you vary your speed. Sometimes I'm at a track meet out there trying to keep up with birds or get birds to flush, and a lot of these things I've learned from my dogs. If you don't have a dog, you want to act like a dog. So if you've got running birds, what I notice is my dogs will pick up their pace and they're trying to find that bird or keep up with that bird to get close enough to make it flush or to get a point on it. So if I'm out there, that's what I'm doing. I mean, I lace up my boots and I'm double timing it through a field. And if that tactic doesn't seem to be working, I'll do just the opposite. I'll go to a snail's pace and I'll just go really slow. Hoping again that one of those two things will give me some flushes and help me see some birds. I guess my attitude towards late season is I throw everything out the window and I try everything. It might not work, but a lot of times it does. In the large fields, pick out a place where birds might be. For some reason, I think birds like small hilltops. I think it gives them good visibility of hunters entering the field. Or for some reason, maybe it's a little weedier or something. The crop didn't do as good, but I've found that a lot of times if I get to the area of a small hilltop or a crest, usually somewhere around that, I'll get a flush. So I might do a circle all the way around that hill and then start pushing toward the top. Just different things like that. Let's see what else I've got. Of course, my favorite is if I can get out in a late season snow. If you can get 2 to 6 inches of snow, first of all, I probably learned more about pheasant hunting on the first snowstorm I ever hunted when I was a kid than I've learned since. You can track them. You can see how close they'll let you go right past them. They'll let you walk within 6 feet of them or less if they can tuck under something. And tracking pheasants, you'll figure out, wow, it's amazing. And that's where you start learning to zigzag and to vary your directions, because that's where you break them from trying to get back around you. So fresh snow and wind, that's what, when that happens, if you can get off work and you can get out, you're going to learn a lot and you're also going to be successful. And then probably my favorite tactic for late season is knocking on doors. We've got all these corners that are open to access. more than likely that farmer will let you hunt that middle of that. And if you got birds boiling into that field, if you can figure out who owns that, and you can catch them or you can knock on their door, very rarely after Thanksgiving will a landowner tell you he doesn't have a place for you to hunt. I have hardly ever been turned down, and most of them don't even know what I do for a living. I just knock on their door as a hunter. And 9 times out of 10, even if it's not the piece that I see birds on and I want to hunt, they'll usually give me 2 or 3 other places to hunt. So that's probably the most important late season tactic that I have, is get where those birds haven't been pressured as much, and you'll find a lot of success.
Awesome. I like those ideas. Thank you for sharing those. Pepper, do you have anything to add that we haven't talked about already?
Bryan, I think I would add that I basically just take the advice of Larry, Josh, and you, and I just stalk you guys throughout the rest of the season and hunt wherever you're hunting. I can't claim to be an expert pheasant hunter, so I apologize. So, but really, what I've been finding, there's probably a few of you out there that are our novice hunters. And what I'm finding when we take you out for your hunts is that you get kind of stuck just walking that straight line and trying to get yourself through the field and from one point to another. And I think, listening to Larry and his advice of being that bird dog on your own, if you don't have a dog, and covering that country. And even in the earlier seasons, I think trying to cover as much country as you can through that grass to get those birds that are hiding is a great idea. So I'm really noticing that on our hunts, that people are focusing on getting from one point of the field to the next point. And I think that tactic of just kind of going everywhere and confusing those birds and backtracking, because they're going to try to circle around you. And if they're anything like trying to hunt pronghorn, which is what I was trying to do with a novice hunter today, they are going to go all the way around you and you're not going to get a chance. So stay versatile, take all of these tactics into account. And if something's not working, change it up. If one thing that Bryan said that you try and it works great one day, it might not work great the next day. So try some of Larry's tactics. So keep it fresh, keep it changing. Don't do what everybody else is doing. And most of all, get out there and have fun. Try to, if it's going to be a bad weather day, try to get a hotel room so you're not having to worry about those roads closing, and you can hunt those days they're really nasty out there. Dress warm, dress appropriately. Take a jet boil and be able to heat some water and tea and some soup or something like that. And I know these aren't actual pheasant hunting tactics, but it's going to keep you guys out in the field on those days where those tactics are going to work the best. So be prepared. Take, sleeping bag in your truck, take warm clothing, take extra socks, take a good pair of glasses that help you see in those windstorms or when the snow is blowing into your eyes. So I guess that's the bit of the advice that I can take is that, just be prepared for yourself. Get out there and exercise, get out there and take walks down your street in a windstorm so you know what it feels like and what to expect, so that you can get out there and do these conditions that Larry and Josh and Bryan are talking about, and you can be successful, and it's not such a hindrance to you just to deal with the elements alone. So get used to the elements when you can, and then get out there and hunt those pheasants on those great days when it's blowing 50 miles an hour wind and snow in your eyes.
Great. Thank you for sharing. I'd send a quick chat out to the attendees to say now is a great time to start sending us some of your questions, and we got a few of them that have come up. We've got a question here on pointers. Any advice on using pointers during the late season? I've got a Flushing mutt, but I bet you Larry or Josh, I know they've got a couple of pointing dogs that they've used. I've seen them work pretty effectively. Larry, can you try and answer this one?
Yeah, so I run German wire hair pointers, have for about 7 years now. The biggest thing is trust your dog. There's so many people that feel like they need to hunt a field in a particular way, and they'll get their dogs trying to hunt the way they want to hunt it. And I trust my dogs. Probably my favorite way to hunt a field with my dog is not into the wind, but I like to hunt perpendicular to the wind, and that gives him a sample of everything coming across his scent, a scent cone coming his way. So I'll figure out which way the wind's blowing, and I'll basically hunt almost perpendicular to it. And then as he's sampling wind, he'll turn and take off on the scent. And that way I find I'll find the birds in that field with him. And then it's a matter of keeping up, because those roosters, they've been chased, they've been probably shot at, and they're not going to hold. They're not going to hold for a point, So keep up with your dog. So when he does lock on, you're going to be there for it. And sometimes, like I say, it's almost a sprint. If it's a running bird moving as fast as they can, and he's getting on top of it, you got to be right there with it. And they won't always get a point. Those birds might flush before they get there. If you have a point, a lot of times late season, it's going to be a hen. I've found that. Those roosters do not want to hold. So unless you can get the deeper snow or something that they can't run in. So I hope that answers your question. If you have some follow-up, feel free to holler.
Great. Thank you for answering that, Larry. We got a few more questions coming in here, and anyone that wants to answer, feel free to weigh in. We got one. Can a walk-in property be posted, the sign right next to the walk-in access sign? Similarly, is a property that is still in the walk-in book that does not have signs anymore, it has in past years, open to hunting? We've got some officers here that I think would be great in answering that. Josh, take it away.
So the first thing I'll say is, with the walk-in properties, if it doesn't have signs on the corners, the best option is to not hunt it, because some of those change due to different circumstances. That book is usually printed in early October. So stuff changes, stuff gets added, stuff gets taken out. There's misprints. All the properties will have signs posted on them. Occasionally you'll find some properties that have walk-in signs in the corners, but you'll find no hunting signs on some of the fence posts, or, we try to take those down, but occasionally they're missed. So, if you see a, hunting by permission only sign, but there's walk-in signs in all four corners and it's in the book, you're good to hunt it. So, and it's always a good idea to look online, because if there are any changes to properties, they're always posted and updated online for those. So.
Great. Thank you, Josh. I know Pepper and I ended up doing some scouting out east, and we've seen a few properties that were in the books but did not have signs up in the corner. So good indication that maybe the property was pulled from the program. So thank you for answering that. We got another dog question. I don't know if we'll be able to go into depth on this one. The question is, what is the best way to train a Labrador to flush birds? I've got a lab myself. I think the best way of training a Labrador or any hunting dog is to probably take the dog to a professional trainer. But if you're like me, I don't have the money to do that. So reading a lot of books is probably the key. Talking to some other hunters. I know both Larry and Josh have excellent hunting dogs. So what advice would you guys give?
Yeah, I really like a book by Dr. Richard Walters. It's called Game Dog. He wrote it probably late 60s or early 70s. He wrote a lot of books: Family Dog, Water Dog, Gun Dog, Game Dog. That's where I learned how to train dogs. I started when I was 16 out of that book. And he teaches you how to train that dog for both waterfowl work and upland hunting. So I would really suggest, it's out on video now, but his methods produce a really good hunting dog. I think probably the biggest key for me to teach or to train, if you've got a dog that'll listen to you and come back on command so he doesn't get too far out, and one that'll retrieve, Those are the two factors right there, is making sure you can stop them, which it's tough. If they've got a strong prey drive and you're bringing that out of them, they get on a pheasant, they're going to want to put that pheasant up and they're not going to want to stop. So you have to have control if you're going to be successful in hunting with them.
Yeah, I think that's one of the great pieces of advice just to get started is that dog control. I've hunted with a few hunters that have taken their dogs out, and they've run all over the place, and a lot of hollering and a lot of scaring the birds out of the field. And it was frustrating for the owner and the other hunters with, and probably for the dog too. So I like that. We got another question. Josh was saying they go to food early in the morning. Is it a good idea to start in the food source and wait, or is it an hour or two after, I think it's sunrise?
What I typically like to do is they're going to be in that heavy roosting cover first thing in the morning. So the first patch out of the day, if it's nasty, windy, snowy conditions, I might look for some tree rows and stuff, but I'm typically going to look for that really thick CRP grass, and I'm going to go hunt that first thing because they're going to be roosted in there, and that's going to be your best chance of finding those birds tucked in that cover and getting in there and flushing them before they get naturally moving and heading to the food. So, second patch of the day, I'm going to start looking at those areas where they're transitioning to that food. Hunting those edges next to the corn circle. If I'm hunting corners, I'm going to hunt the corner right on the border of the corn and try to catch those birds transitioning into the food. And then later in the morning, I'm going to go hunt wheat stubble or milo stubble or corn stalks and actually hunt them when they're out there feeding. And then I'll go back into that heavy cover midday because they'll be back in their low feed midday. And then when they move there back in the afternoon, I'll do the same thing, go target the food. And then usually the last patch of the day, I'll hit the heavy cover again as they're getting ready to roost.
I like that advice. That's a lot of times what I try to do is early in the day, late in the day, I'm trying to catch birds as they're moving from cover to food or food back to cover at some point, and have had some success with catching those birds like that. And I do if I don't find birds in one type of cover, I search for some type of radically different cover to go hunt in as well. So just some of the things that I do. Larry, do you have anything to add onto that one about hunting near food early in the morning? Do you have any other things that have worked for you?
I think Josh pretty well covered it. They're going to be moving back and forth. So just concentrate on trying to be in between the two if you're not hunting one or the other. So that's probably the main thing.
Great. I know we already answered one of these questions, but I thought for the sake of the group, there's a question: any tips on shooting in heavy winds? How much to lead the bird by? I think that's a pretty good question. I imagine the wind has a little bit of impact on it. And Larry, I liked your answer. Would you mind maybe sharing your answer on tips on shooting into heavy winds and thinking about how to, if you need to lead the bird extra, or what you can do?
Well, I just said, so late season or in heavy wind, I'll jump up to some heavier shot. Instead of being out there with 5s or 6s, I'll go to 4s, or I might even go to 2s if it's really windy. And then I'll also switch to a full choke. If we're talking late season, we're expecting those birds are going to be getting up a little further out there. So full choke and heavier shot. And then I think for me, I have a tendency to try to lead them too much. Whether we're talking wind or not, that shot gets out there pretty fast. So I don't lead any further than I feel like I need to. In fact, I usually reel that in a little bit, even when the wind's blowing. And then the other thing is I try to factor that tail completely out of my sight picture. We have a tendency to see this great big long target, and the last 20 inches of that thing is not a target at all. So focus on the head, focus on that white ring, and that's your target. You know, the adage out there from the Patriot, aim small, miss small, that applies with a pheasant. If you can pick that head out like it's a dove, you're going to connect and you're going to kill the bird a lot better than if you're looking at the whole bird. You're going to, you know, you might break a wing and then you got a runner out there. So that's probably what I would say about that.
Great advice. Thank you. That is the end of all of our questions right now. If we've got any attendees, we just had one more. So let's go to that. I like non-toxic shot. I understand it has a different characteristic to lead. To lead? Sorry, I understand it has a different characteristic to lead. Do you have a recommendation for a good baseline for non-toxic shot size? And we're talking 12 and 20 gauge. I like that as well. I think I might be switching almost all my ammo to the non-toxic opportunities as I kind of shoot through my current stash. I plan on buying a lot more of the non-toxic shot. But I imagine, either Josh or Larry or Pepper, anyone want to weigh in on that?
You know, I've shot a lot of pheasants with number 4 steel in some areas where I know there's ducks too. And like Larry said, with the wind, don't be afraid to move up in shot, you know, some 1s, 2s, get a little bigger shot. And there's a lot of options out there anymore with some of the tungsten loads and the tungsten mix. You're going to pay a little more for them, but the performance on them and the ability to reach out there is pretty amazing with some of those new loads. So if you have the ability, looking at some of those tungsten loads may be worthwhile, especially late season birds.
I'll weigh in a little bit. I think 3 steel is my favorite. I haven't spent a lot of money on any of the new loads or anything like that. I've got a bunch in my reserves too that I need to go through. But probably one of my favorites, if I'm somewhere where I think there's going to be waterfowl as well. You know, I have 2 vests. I've got my upland vest, and then if I'm going to be in the river bottom or somewhere where there's a chance for waterfowl, I carry a vest that's got all steel, and I've got quail loads in one pocket in that vest, and then I've got my pheasant and duck loads in the other pocket. And probably 3s are my favorite if I think I'm going to be doing one or the other, whether it's pheasants or ducks there. I really like 4s and 3s, so that's where I am.
Great, I like that. Pepper, looks like we got another question that came in about how to find the walk-in access locations.
Yeah, so the specific question is how to find them online. And what you do is you're going to go to our website, Colorado Parks and Wildlife, and there's a search box in the very top corner, the right-hand corner of our website. And you're just going to type in 2020 late cropland access brochure. And that brochure is going to be the most up-to-date, and it is online, so you can download it onto your phone and carry it with you. And then use that with a program like Onyx Maps to kind of help you figure out where you actually are. But just know that the Onyx Maps is not the most up-to-date. You're going to want to go to our brochure, make sure it's in our brochure, and then also make sure it's signed, just like Josh and Larry were saying. If there's no sign, don't hunt it. So in short, go back to our website, Colorado Parks and Wildlife, and search for the 2020 late cropland access brochure. And that's going to have the map of every county delineated with all of the most current access properties. And you can download that onto your phone, or you can print it out at home and take it with you, or you can get the brochures at anywhere you can sell or buy a hunting license.
Great. I'd add, and there's another option there as well. Our Colorado Hunting Atlas shows, Forest Service, BLM, all sorts of lands. Right. It also has walk-in access as well. So I know I study that before I go out, and I start looking at some of the aerial photos and maybe some topography and kind of make a little bit of a game plan. I can start looking for those tree rows, or I can start looking for even some potential food sources nearby that are just even if I can't hunt it, I'm still looking for some of those pivot areas in fields nearby. So I might be able to hunt near, but hopefully there's still pheasants in the area that have that reliable food source. So good, thank you.
Hey, Brian, I tried to share in chat, I hope it'll work, a link to an article that Tom Remington wrote back in 2014 in Colorado Outdoors. It's a late season tactic type thing. It's got some really good information in it. If people are looking for something else to read, you can just pull it up online and take a look at it, but it's a really good article too.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a good article. I've read that one a couple of times. It's a good one. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I believe we are out of questions. We've got just a minute or two. If there's anyone that still has a question they want to send our way, we'll spend a couple minutes. Otherwise, we'll probably close up the webinar in just a few minutes. I think, in my opinion, on hunting pheasants late season, I actually like hunting late season sometimes more than early season. I'm not a fan of hunting when there's crowds. So I usually skip opening weekend. I don't even go out. I know it's a rite of passage for so many pheasant hunters, and sometimes that's the only time they go out, or maybe over Thanksgiving break. But that's only a small portion of the pheasant season. So in most of Colorado, at least the eastern side of Colorado, the season goes to the end of January. There are some parts of the state where that season is a little bit less than that. So consult your small game brochure so you know where those boundaries are and you know those dates before you go out hunting. But most of northeast Colorado is going to go to the end of January, and we still have over a month and a half of pheasant hunting in front of us. We also have some other small game species that are out there as well that you might run into the field. Some rabbits and hares out there as well. So yeah, I encourage people, get out hunting. It's a long season, and it's good exercise. It's time to go, call up some friends. Might be something that maybe you want to invite a new hunter to go with you. There's probably a lot of people that want to try hunting and they just don't have someone to take them. So I encourage you, just, ask your coworkers, ask friends, family, be willing to take someone hunting with you one of these days as well. Make sure you go through some firearm safety with them, talk to them about safe shooting zones, the expectations, go through the brochure with them and cover some of the regulations out there so that they go out in the field with some confidence as well. Show them how to load and unload safely. So help them out. I would not encourage you to start with blocking with some brand new hunters out there, but there's plenty of tactics that you can use out in the field as well. I don't see any more questions. Would any of the panelists like to share any closing thoughts or add anything?
I'd throw out there, anybody on here, they can reach out at any time, call the brush office, get a hold of me, find my email address, whatever. Our numbers are available if they call Division of Wildlife, and if they've got questions, or I'll talk pheasants and pheasant hunting for hours and hours. So just don't hesitate to reach out. And again, don't hesitate to knock on a door. You find some birds, go to the closest house and knock on the door. What's the worst thing they can do? Say no. But a lot of times you'll get a yes. So do that.
Great.
Josh, I just wanted to add one thing, Brian. Did Josh had something?
No, go ahead, Pepper.
Just for our novice pheasant hunter program participants in today's webinar, I know most of you have gotten signed up for hunts. I think that's awesome. A lot of you have gotten signed up for 2 hunts. Make sure you get on those hunts and try to, I think Larry has a lot of hunts left. He's got a couple of openings. He's an amazing person to go with as a mentor and a hunt leader. So try to get on to some of those hunts if you haven't already. And if you have some dates, if we have hunts out there that you can't attend those dates, but you still want to go on a hunt and you can get on, if we put another date out there, let me know when that is. And I can maybe throw some more hunts together. We've got other officers who are wanting to take hunts out, but we just didn't know if we had the demand. So if you're wanting to get out there and there's not a date available to those folks who are in our novice hunter program, please let me know, send me an email, and I'll talk to Larry and Josh and see what we can't come up with, especially if we've got a late season storm that comes up. I know Larry likes to get folks out when there's a storm. So maybe we can work something out. So reach out to me. That's what I'm here for. and we'll get you out there on a hunt again.
That late minute, you know, if within a day or two we've got a forecast of a storm rolling in, and if there's any way I can change my schedule around and get out there with some novice hunters, I will do it. So just, you know, let's keep the finger on the pulse of the weather and go from there.
Great. Josh, you have any last closing comments before we break?
I was just going to echo what Larry said. Happy to help. People want to reach out and have questions about pheasant hunting or, you know, habitat or bird conditions in Yuma County. More than happy to help. And I'd throw out there too, there's a lot of social media sites, Facebook and different ones where there's specific bird hunting upland groups for Colorado. And if you follow those, there's a lot of people that are post on there, you know, hey, I'm wanting to go out hunting in the Holyoke area. Anybody interested in going along? So there's some pretty good tools that, you know, you can use some of those social networks to find people to go hunt with and create some of those relationships. So
Great. Well, thank you all for presenting and talking about your expertise, your experience tonight, sharing this with other hunters. So thank you for joining us. I know I'm going to take some of the ideas that you guys talked about and use them when I go out this season as well. So if you guys do run into any of these district wildlife managers or wildlife officers out in the field, you know, they're going to check you, make sure you have your license and everything's all legal and stuff. But once they get that out of the way, you know, talk to them, you know, let them know what you're seeing out there in the field, but ask them questions. They're a wealth of knowledge. They're out in those fields day after day after day. They know a ton of information. So not only are they checking hunters, they're planting habitat out there. They're working with the local landowners. They're doing a lot of this on the ground work. They know a ton of information about wildlife and their habitat. So if you do see these officers out there, you know, feel free to reach out to them. There are a lot of great folks out there full of knowledge, and they like to help hunters. They like to help you guys out as well. So with that, I would like to
hey, Brian, real quick, we've got one more question that's showing up. How do you get signed up for the novice hunter list? So it's too late this year to get signed up for it, but next spring, be looking on our website under the hunter outreach page. So again, you're going to go to Colorado Parks and Wildlife. You're going to go to the search box and do hunter outreach, and it'll show you, bring up a page of the different hunts that we have available, and novice pheasant hunter program is one of those options. So you just fill out the form and submit it online, and then we get your name as long as you fit the criteria of the form based on your novice hunter status. Then we put you on the list and we invite you to a half-day class. This year it was a webinar, so it'll probably be a webinar again this next year, I'm assuming, with COVID. And so you go to a half-day classroom and then a half-day out in the field where we teach you how to work a field, the basics, the safety, handling a firearm with other hunters, and then we actually do a wing shooting clinic for you. And then you get to get invited to these novice hunts. So it's a little bit of a process, but look for that online in May, right, Brian? And we'll be posting that out there. You can get yourself signed up just through our website, and then we have your name and we'll send you the rest of the information.
Usually the programs are, usually it's in July is when we do the program. So we open the applications up in May, usually close them by mid-June. So yeah, and there's other applications you can fill out, other mentored hunt opportunities, seminars and clinics, a lot of ways to learn through our hunter outreach program. So, all right, with that, let's close our webinar tonight. Again, thank you speakers for presenting. I appreciate all your advice. Thank you for the attendees that are still online. Good luck hunting out there this season. Try and get out. It's a lot of fun. Even if you don't harvest a bird, it's just fun to get outdoors.